everyone, this is one of our virtual Ag Day experiences with the gardening unit. We are in Connersville, Indiana, and this is John Johnson. He has been gardening for 49 years, so he has a lot of experience to share with us. So let's get started.
Thank you.
All right, first off, if you can tell us a little bit about your garden and what you like about gardening.
Well, I've always liked gardening since I grew up on the farm when I was a young boy, and I learned to like the soil. I just learned to like to plant and to grow. And when we really look at life, you know, all of life is like a gardening. It's planting and it's reaping and it's harvesting. So there's nothing more enjoyable than to start a garden in the springtime, to plant things and to watch them grow, and later to go out and enjoy the fruits of all your labors.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, what type of plants do you have here?
What we have right here, Amanda, is basically my strawberry crop. It's been a very good year this year. I would imagine I've probably picked at least 100 quarts or more. We're just about on the downside of the crop, though. There's very few left now. But the good thing about the last of the crop is the last are always the sweetest, probably because they're the last.
Yeah.
And beyond this, I have my green beans and my sweet corn.
Wow, you got a lot of green beans. That's awesome. All right. So does it matter where you place your garden?
Very, very definitely, Amanda. One of the problems that we can have with the garden is if you get too much shade, it doesn't allow, you know, the sunlight to come in, and plants need a lot of sunlight. And if you put your garden in a spot where it is too wet, stays too moist, then the moisture prohibits the plants from growing properly. That is one of the problems I have with the rest of the garden area there. Normally in the springtime it stays too wet too long, but the areas I've selected here generally will dry out much more quicker in the springtime.
Okay. And then do you just let the natural rainfall come down, or do you supplement with watering it yourself?
Normally I like the natural rainfall because the natural rain really has nitrogen and a lot of essential elements that plants need. I do have a water system. We fortunately are on the Everton water system, but I found that when you water your plants, it doesn't do them as much good as just a good natural rainfall. I do have the means to capture rainfall when it comes off the roof of the barn. So if I need to water periodically, I can get some natural rainwater there for them.
Great. All right, can you explain the proper way to plant seeds or even plant starter plants?
Well, the most important thing in planting any seed is to get the ground worked up very, very good. And I normally like to use a manual rototiller to work my garden. I do have a large tractor that has one of the rototillers on behind it, but I find that the tractors will compact the soil too much. So if you use just a walk-behind tiller and till the soil 2 or 3 times and get it real good and fine, and then plant your seed, they will come up a lot faster. And it also makes it much easier to work the plants after they're growing.
Okay, and the same for starter plants?
And strawberry plants, normally a strawberry crop is a crop that takes a lot of faith. I always say that if you're not a person of faith, you'll never plant strawberries, because the first year you set out strawberry plants, you do not get any fruit. You may get a few blossoms, but you are to pick the blossoms off of the plants. And that first year then, when you will set out your plants maybe 12 or 14 inches apart, and by the end of the growing season, they will have put out runners and spread. Sometimes they will get too thick on you. So the next year, when you're picking your crop, after you've picked them, then you need to go through and thin out the plants.
All right. And then how do you take care of your plants while they're growing?
Well, one of the most important implements you can use when you have a garden is called the H-O-E, pronounced hoe. Most people don't like to use a hoe because it takes a lot of work, but with the hoe you can get in between the plants within the row to break up the ground, which is which I have always considered very, very important, is to keep the ground around your plants broken up and keep it loose. And then the next implement you need is what I call a rototiller, and that is used to go between the rows to break up the ground. But I've always considered it important to keep your soil as loose as you possibly can during your growing season.
Okay, and then do you ever have any insect problems?
Insect problems are always a problem no matter what you're raising. And for instance, my potato crop is usually one of the first crops I like to plant in the spring. I like to usually plant the potatoes, you know, at least maybe the third or fourth week in April if possible. But what you generally incur on potatoes is there's a potato bug that gets on them very, very quickly. Normally what I like to do, if they're not real thick, is just to go through and pick them off by hand. Now that may be a little bit squeamish because the potato bugs in their infant state are sort of look like a red jelly bean, and they can be kind of messy. But if the insects are very heavy, then you have to use some type of pesticide. But I really don't like to use a lot of pesticides, particularly on anything that you're going to be eating. That sometimes is necessary depending on how bad the insects are.
And what are pesticides?
Pesticides, Sunch's 7 is generally an all-around type of pesticide. You can use it as a dust or as a spray.
Okay. All right, and then when do you start your garden?
Some people like to start their garden as indoor plants, but I don't do that. What I like to do is to buy good, strong, healthy plants from a greenhouse or a nursery somewhere. And there's a lot of nurseries around that do have good plants.
Okay, and then about when in the season is everything done growing?
Well, the growing season continues usually until about mid-July. Normally by mid-July most of the onions have already formed and are completed. Potatoes have made their maturity, and the vines are dying. Sweet corn is coming by then. So usually by mid-August most of the garden is just about done. Now what you can do is generally in late August you can start a fall garden. There are certain types of salads and so forth, even beans and so forth, that you can plant in August, and they will continue to bear up until even frost time. So you can actually have 2 gardens within a year's time.
All right, even better. Is there anything else that you want to share about gardening with us?
Well, I guess what I would like to share, particularly for young people, is that gardening can be so rewarding. There is nothing more rewarding than to get out and play in the dirt. I always say that this is what young people today need to do, is to get their hands dirty, get their fingernails dirty by digging and playing in the dirt. It takes a lot of time and effort, it gives you a lot of good exercise, but the reward is that you get to eat some very delicious food that otherwise you will not find anywhere else. So it does have a reward when you see things that you put into the soil start to sprout, to grow and mature, and finally go out and find there on that tomato vine a nice red ripe tomato and eat it there in the field. That is the reward of having a garden.
Yes, it's very rewarding. All right, do you want to show us any of your plants?
Sure, we can take a tour around. Let's go over to the other garden here where we have most of the variety of my garden.
All right.
This is our water supply if I have to water the garden. Like I say, I don't really like to do that because the water that comes out of the city's water supply system just doesn't do for plants what Mother Nature does with her water. What I would like to show you here is something that I really enjoy raising. I enjoy raising onions. Now these are, there's about 3 different varieties of onions here. There are the Texas Super Sweet, and these onions will get the size sometimes even of a grapefruit. And I have a variety of red onions, which is a nice onion for using in your salads. But what I have found about raising onions is that they take a lot of water. You don't keep them totally saturated in water, but you should always keep the row that they're growing in at least damp and wet. That was something that I really learned by experience. And the other thing about raising onions is once they start to form what I call the bulb, then you start taking the soil away from the bulb, which allows it to expand. And of course, the rest of the items that we have here is sweet corn. I have a couple varieties of sweet corn. There are what they call hybrid varieties, and they are cultivated for, you know, the sweetness and the tenderness. And then I have mangoes, and the mango crop doesn't look too good. For some reason, the plants I bought this year, I think, had been planted in the nursery too early, and they got what I call root bound within the containers, so they have to really take a second growth. Tomatoes is something that everybody enjoys. So easy to raise a tomato. You just sort of put it in the ground and cultivate around it and let it take care of itself. And then one other thing I enjoy raising is potatoes. And I have about 3 different kinds of potatoes. One is a red potato, and my wife likes those because we generally dig those before they completely mature, and she bakes those in the oven. And another is what is called Yukon Gold. Yukon Gold is a potato that when you cut it open, it tends to have a yellow flesh in it, and it makes the best mashed potatoes. And then I have another variety called Kennebec, and a Kennebec potato becomes rather long and oblong, and they are excellent for baking. Then on the far end I have beets. My wife likes to make pickled beets, and we also like to eat beets just cooked fresh with butter. And then spinach, and we do have radishes and lettuce. I do have a zucchini. In the far back I have something that was sent to me as a free gift from the seed company called Chinese cabbage. I don't know what it will look like, whether it'll be like cabbage or what, but it once again is just a novelty to raise. Then of course I have a few sunflower seed planted around. So a garden doesn't have to be a huge space. You can put a lot of items in a very small space, and when one item matures and it's ready to be pulled or discarded, then in its place you can plant something else. So I would encourage you young people, if you like to get out in the soil and you like to plant something, start a garden.
All right, well, thank you again, and that's the conclusion of our virtual Ag Day experience with the garden unit.
Right. Thank you.